Okay, it says we're live.
Great.
We're so excited to do this mini class on market research with you guys. We have been talking to our students and our community and listening and surveying. And one of the biggest things that we're hearing right now is that people don't know what to sell and that they feel bad selling or they feel weird selling. And this is something that we hear a lot when people are starting as coaches and starting as entrepreneurs, or when they're starting something new as a coach or as an entrepreneur. So, like, maybe they're starting to sell one-on-one coaching and they've never done that before. They've only ever sold products, or they're starting to sell a group program and they haven't done that before. They've only ever sold one-on-one coaching, right? The list goes on. I think anytime you're doing something new, you feel like a beginner again. And what we're noticing about this time is that people feel like beginners, whether they
Yeah.
are or they aren't. Do you have anything to add to that, Liv?
Um, just that we're really excited to do this and to help everyone. I think one thing I wanted to add was that like we actually had to go back and do more market research ourselves. You learn your market and then things in the world change, things in people's lives change. And it's, I think, the ideal time to just revisit some of the basics. And so essentially what Katie and I put together was like this 3-part training. So we're going to be here the next 2 Thursdays after this, going through market research, and um, we're going to start with how to plan for it and how to, we'll get into that in a second, what we're going to cover today. But I think it's really a process that you often hear that you're supposed to do when you're starting your company, but it's not often something that happens again and again. And I think what we've realized and everyone is realizing right now is that it has to happen more than once. And it's often the thing that's going to make your next offer, your next product, or your next service actually sell and generate revenue and change people's lives and all that. You have to go back to the basics first, though. So that's all. You ready to dive in?
Yeah. Um, Okay, so part one. So today's about part one. We're going to have a part two, and we're even going to have a part three. And we're going to be doing these little mini classes on Thursdays over the next 3 weeks. So be sure to set your schedule and be here. The 4 steps that we're going to take you through today are writing your hypothesis, deciding between quantitative and qualitative research, choosing your approach, and then designing powerful question sets. So I'll go ahead and start us off. I'll do the intro, and Liv, you can do hypothesis, and then we'll go back and forth.
Okay, great.
So you have to ask yourself right now, what does your what does your ideal client need? What does your ideal client need? Because what your ideal client needed 30 days ago is different than what they need today. And what they needed 6 months ago is certainly different than what they need today. And that's not always, like, it hasn't always been that way. But I think that we're living in a time right now where it is like that. So we don't know, like, we're not interested in going back to normal or going back to business as usual. Inside of IGC, we are major proponents of the world changing massively. And so I think it's really important that we are prepared and that we help prepare all of you to live in a world where things are constantly growing and changing, and people are becoming more and more aware and awake, and the world is more progressive. And that means you have to keep your business being very progressive. And the best way to do that is not just make guesses and assertions, which are hypotheses and we're going to discuss. It's valuable, but you want to be getting actual data. So what does your ideal client need? Every business, well, not every business, a lot of people just start a business because they want to and they never get market research or data, and they often fail. So I would say, like, every business that really wants to serve a specific market starts with market research. And this is the process of gathering info on what your ideal client needs, wants, and prefers. And while you're watching this, what I'd really love is if you could share this with someone that you think it's going to be helpful for. If you would tag them in this or share the link, we'd be really grateful. We want all entrepreneurs and life coaches to be able to serve as many people as possible. And this is, a changing time. So whether you're doing something new, like I said at the beginning, or you're in new times, which we all are, it's easy to get overwhelmed and worry that your work isn't relevant. Liv and I talk to coaches all day long. Some have been in the game for like 3 months or 3 weeks or 3 days. And then some have been in the game for like 3 years or 5 years. And when you're talking to someone at different people at every stage, and they're all saying like, I'm so confused, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, I feel weird about selling, it's like, okay, this is a problem that we need to help people solve. So you need to represence yourself to who you can serve and how you can serve them. And the way to do that is to find out what's going on with your ideal client right now. So what does your ideal client need, want, and prefer? That's the definition of market research, is finding out what someone needs, wants, and prefers. What does your ideal client need, want, and prefer? Okay, Liv, you take us away.
It's so funny not being able to see each other. Okay. So the first step to, taking on market research again, like whether you're new or you're doing this again because of times changing or because you're changing and all of that, the first thing you want to do is write your hypothesis. When I first saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, take me back to like high school science class. But you really have to start there. And market research, AKA figuring out what your ideal client wants, needs, and prefers, always starts here. So a hypothesis by definition, which I threw in at the last minute yesterday because like some people might not remember this, is a proposed explanation made from limited evidence, and it's a starting point for your further research. So you can develop your hypothesis around what your ideal client wants, needs, and prefers by just asking yourself that question. And with everything you know about your ideal client, if you've ever done an ideal client avatar, or even just from doing pro bono coaching clients or new coaching clients, or things that you've learned just from talking to people, you probably have some general idea of what your client is like and what they're looking for. And so you want to focus your research on their desires, their pain points, and their practical needs. So some things to consider when you're writing your hypothesis are, what is your ideal client desire right now? And again, like I'm going to say, like, not to harp on the same thing over and over again, but that's like one of the things in teaching, is saying the same thing over and over again. It's like things have changed dramatically for every single human being in the world, right? And so right now, what your ideal client needs may have shifted. And so you really want to focus on, what does your ideal client desire right now? What are their pain points right now? I know all of us have different pain points right now than we did a year ago. Probably some of the same. And what are some of their practical needs right now? And so you want to start by answering those questions. So if you're watching this, jot them down, or you can watch the replay. But this is where you're going to start to develop your hypothesis from these questions.
I want to just speak. Do you mind going back for 1 second, Liv?
Sure.
I want to just say one thing about this last point here, which is like, this is obviously, definitions of things like hypotheses and market research, like those are things that exist out in the world. But this training is a training that Liv and I put together based on our own experience and years and years and years, almost 10 years of working with new entrepreneurs and most specifically coaches. And so I want to just highlight this last point here, because a lot of marketing is based on one of these things. So in a traditional marketing and sales world, you'll be taught to focus on people's pain points. That will speak to certain people, and it's important that we address some of that. But a lot of what we presence people to and speak to in the type of marketing that we do is their vision, their desires, their wants. What's like the most beautiful, what do you see in the most beautiful version of your life? Or if your business was super easy to run and providing for all your needs, what would it look like? Right. So this visionary type of marketing. And then practical is just like, on a very practical level, what do people need? So you want to be looking at those three things. What does someone desire? What are their pain points? And then also what are their practical needs? Because you'll get different information from each lens.
Yeah, and I like the like reiteration of focusing on the vision and focusing on the desire, because I know that who we're speaking to, especially in this group right now in this training, are a lot of coaches, right? And our job is to constantly be representing people to their goals, to their vision, to their desires, and helping them move the pain points out of the way. So I think it also translates into that conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so we gave you a couple examples or a few examples so of how to write out your hypothesis. So here's an example one. Your ideal client is a burnt out parent experiencing extra stress and anxiety right now. They're overwhelmed with their partner and our kids at home, and they aren't making any time for themselves. That's a good example. I think when you're doing your hypothesis, even, 2 to 3 sentences about the main things. And then once you get into the market research, that's where you get the specifics and the details. So another example, your ideal client is a socially conscious entrepreneur who doesn't know what or how to post online, create content right now because of the state of the world. They feel frozen in their business. Katie, is that one of our hypotheses? And then,
Something we've been hearing so often.
yeah, yeah. Example, your ideal client is a human rights activist who's bombarded with work right now, needs support, and is struggling to prioritize, but doesn't know where to start or who they can trust to help. So if you're watching this live with us right now, maybe you want to start jotting out, like, my ideal client is da 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 da, how they are feeling, what's going on with them, and maybe like where they're getting stuck and what they actually desire. So hit those 3 questions that we talked about on the previous slide as you're jotting down your hypothesis.
And in these examples here, like we wanted to give a few different examples. So we didn't get to like the desire or the vision part. This was more just like practical and pain points, but you can like, tease out one of these a bit more. So let's just take the first one. Your
Mm-hmm.
ideal client is a burnout parent. Okay, pain point. They're experiencing extra stress and anxiety. They can't sleep at night. That, like, what are the other things? They're not taking care of their health and their nutrition. They're fighting a lot with their partner. Like, you can come up with like all these subsets of things that are happening, almost like symptoms of the
Mm-hmm.
problem. And then you can also go into like, well, what do they actually desire? Well, they desire to like use this time where their kids are home and their partner's working from home to create a new level of intimacy in their family. Like, their vision is that this would all like actually work really well, and that they would um be growing close. Like, what is like the ideal vision, and someone who, like, if you're serving someone who is an activist, um then, like, what is their vision for the world? Like, we want to go, like, go big when we visualize and when we like start to hypothesize the vision on behalf of our clients. Please proceed.
Okay, so once you have your hypothesis, that's step one, then you want to start collecting data. So before we do that, Katie, I'm going to have you do this, but like, what type of data do you want to collect? And we're really going into like, when we were putting this together, I was like, I feel like I'm going back to school in a sense, but like, this is what we have to do. We have to kind of go back to the basics if we really want to get meaningful information that can help us connect with the right people, create the right program or offer or service or product, and then actually get it in the hands of the people who truly need it and recognize that they need it. So we're going to look at first 2 types of data. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so qualitative data, qualitative versus quantitative. Quantitative involves numbers, you're like getting quantities. You're able to look at things more linearly. Qualitative is more informative and I don't know why I'm not just reading the definitions here.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't either.
Qualitative data is gathered through text, writing, observation, interviews, audio, video recording. It's non-statistical. Okay, allows for more narrative feedback. That's what I was uh,
Yeah.
pointing at. But it gives you more of like a feeling of what people are experiencing. I think this helps, really contribute to the vision, and it also allows for a lot of open interpretation. Quantitative data is really important because it's close-ended questions. Yes, no. Is this you? Yes, no, maybe. Numbers, like rank yourself on the scale of 0 to 10. How confident do you feel about investing right now, right? Or what ranges would you be willing to invest in? Or what is your age range, or what is your range of kids that you have? Or questions where it's cut and dry. Statistical and structured data collection that allows for defined value. You went really official with the definitions here. Defined values and exact responses recording. But quantitative data, uh, unlike qualitative data, you can sort really easily. You can look at a graph or a pie chart and say, okay, 50% said yes, 25% said maybe, 25% said no. So you really need both, is the point. And we're going to dig into what that actually looks like.
Yeah, and I think the value in quantitative data is that it gives you those exact responses. So when Katie and I recently did a survey for our community, it was a mix of qualitative and quantitative questions, and asking people like, how much money are you currently making in your business? How much money do you want to be making in your business? How many clients did you have when you started? That stuff is actually really helpful. How long have you been in business? And then other qualitative, like, and then we mix in the qualitative where it's like, okay, what is actually stopping you? And we can collect their exact language, or like what's working for you. We can collect their exact language. And so both of them are valuable. And we're going to talk to you about the different methods of gathering that. So the next part is choosing your approach. So there's a lot of different ways to do market research. Katie and I are going to cover three that we think work especially well, especially in the online business world and in the coaching world. So now that you think you know your ideal client, the next step is to gather the further evidence so that you can know for certain what's going on with them and how to serve them. And it really is one thing to presume or assume that we know our ideal client, because often, especially in the world of coaching, we say like, you're probably a version of your ideal client maybe a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or you probably resonate with a lot of the things that you're looking for in your ideal client. But there's so much more value in actually getting their experience and getting their language. And I often will joke with people who are first starting to market and they're like posting all of these things in like coach speak or in personal development language, and it's like lofty and beautiful in a sense, but it may not be the language that your ideal client is using, or the words in their head, or the phrases that they're like, I always think like when we are in a place of indecision, we're like running all these questions through our head or all these scenarios, and their language is often different than what we present to them. And so we want to get more exact information from them. And the three ways that we're going to talk about gathering this information are through surveys, through email, and through conducting phone interviews. So those are the three methods or approaches. You want to do surveys, Katie?
Mm-hmm. So surveys, pros, allows you to reach a broad audience. So you can post a survey on Facebook. You can post it in the link in your Instagram bio, where you like have people swipe up if you have over 10,000 followers. You can send it out in an email. You can ask other people to send it out. You can use the forward and share functions, right? So you can reach as many people, and you can likely reach more people that you don't even know. So for a survey, you want to say at the top of the survey, like what your ideal client or your avatar is, who this is for. Is it for moms? Is it for dads? Is it for single parents? Is it for a teacher? Like, who are you talking to? And what the criteria are, so that people know whether or not they can answer. It allows an anonymity if needed, meaning like if it's a sensitive subject or you think like you'll get more responses and you don't need to know the actual people that answered. You can make it anonymous. And it allows you to ask a wide range of qualitative and quantitative questions and gather extensive data in less time. So it's a really great way to reach a broad group and get a broad stroke. Cons: respondents may rush through answers or leave out information. Multiple options on surveys can be challenging to sift through, meaning as you try to distill the information, um, it can just take more time. Respondents may not have the space to elaborate further when offering multiple choice. So, um, you can always ask as a follow-up question in a survey, could you elaborate more on your answer to question number 5? But you miss some of that conversational research that you can get from a call, or sometimes even an email. And it can be more challenging to build a personal relationship and, quickly convert to a sale. So we like surveys. We think they work really well to get a lot of data fast, and we often use it in connection with calls and emails. So we really suggest that you use all 3 approaches as you're doing your research.
Totally. Cool. So the next one, email research. I feel like I've been seeing a ton of this lately. I don't know if you guys are on a lot of email lists, but I've been getting a lot of emails lately that say, can you reply with your thoughts on XYZ? Or response required to this email, and they'll ask you a question. And so that's kind of what we're talking about here. So email research pros allows you to reach a broader audience. So you can send, a mass email similar to how you do a survey. It does allow you to connect more intimately because you are using back and forth exchange. So like I said, I'm on quite a few email mailing lists, and I've been getting emails that say like, I'd love to know what's working in your business since COVID, or what isn't working in your business, for example. Please just reply. And then it starts a little bit of a conversational exchange between you and the person sending the email. So that's good. It does allow you to ask some follow-up questions, and quick. And it's also good because typically, if people read an email, it's not too hard to respond. They don't have to go to another window or, take a lot of time. It helps you gather qualitative data that you can reference for language of your ideal client. So like Katie and I were talking about before, how we think our ideal clients interpret their pain points or their vision may be slightly different in terms of language. And so you can actually get their language via email. Cons: typically short, like 1 to 2 question emails are appropriate for this. You don't want to send an email to a lot of people with 3, 4, 5, 10 questions. You probably won't get as much of a response because it just looks like a lot of work for that person. So it may limit the data you can actually receive. It can be a little bit more difficult to gather and track the quantitative data with an email, but that just depends on the question that you're asking, or the 1 to 2 questions that you're asking. And anonymity is not possible. Typically with email, most people have their name tied to their email, so you'd have to make sure that people are comfortable asking or responding to the questions that are being asked. And if they're not, it may inhibit them from actually responding. Our favorite one next.
Phone interviews. So I've been doing these for years and years and years, and I think they're so important. And I will mention that, like, if you have a really active business and you are very busy right now, like, don't undermine that. You're always doing market research because you're always speaking to your market. That's why, like, building your coaching practice up to where it's consistent and you're always seeing people kind of keeps it flowing, because who you're speaking to, how to create content that serves them because you're always working with them and you're always speaking to them. If you don't have that flow, then, and we'll get to this in part 2, what we recommend is like that in lieu of clients in the beginning, you just start setting up market research calls and you start having free conversations with people, and that you do this at any time within your business. You're never too far ahead or too advanced to do market research. It's not like lessening yourself. It's not like you're just doing free work. You're doing work that you're ultimately going to get hired for. So phone interviews, pro, it's the easiest way to build relationship and convert to a potential client. It allows you to be more intimately connected with those people. It allows you space to ask follow-up questions. So like in a survey, the questions are the questions. On the phone, you might think of a follow-up question or want to dig deeper to get more clarity. That's way easier on the phone. You not only have words or text to refer to, but tone and level of engagement. So like you're not just hearing what they say as a response, you're hearing their tone, you're hearing their engagement. Like when you ask them a question, is their response more excited or do they sound like very dull and unengaged? That's something to dig into more. Cons, note taking can be challenging depending on the conversation. We do recommend recording the calls, but that has to be disclosed. It's a little more time consuming to invite, schedule, and conduct a high volume of calls. But again, we're going to touch on this next week, but you can be, kind of consistently talking to like 2 new people every week. And that's really manageable for 15, 20-minute calls. Distilling the data can be a bit more challenging. But that can be prevented with having clear questions established ahead of time and having a system for tracking and note taking so that you can see patterns, which we're also going to get to.
Awesome. So how do like once you choose your approach, and so like Katie and I said, we think there's value in a mix of all three. And over time you will probably use all three different ways. Um, but then it comes down to, and this is really the bread and butter of today. It's like, okay, but what are we asking, and like what do we want to know? Because that's going to drive what actually happens in our business. So it's time to design powerful questions, and we talk about powerful questions all the time in coaching, right? And like how to know what to ask, and when to use close-ended questions versus open. And so when you're surveying, you do want to use a mix of both. So the first thing is you want to get clear on what you need to know about your ideal clients. And depending on what your service is or what your product is, this would change. But we want to give you some ideas. So you may need to know the basics, like who are who are they? Like how old are they? Where are they located? Are they married, single, dating, whatever? What is their family structure? Like, do they have children? Like the actual basics of who your ideal client is. Go even deeper than that. Their occupation or their professional life, meaning like, are they a student? How long have they been in school? How long have they been looking for a job? Anything like that. Income level or their desired income level. Again, this is another one of those things where it's, you may be considering if you need anonymity or not. What is their education? What interests do they have? What hobbies do they have? Any of that may be helpful in you really being able to speak the language of your ideal client and develop the right course or product or service. And then even deeper, and this is where like you really need qualitative data or like more open-ended questions. What's working in their life, business, or relationship. If you're already niched down a little bit more than that, you may even want to get more specific, like what's working in your dating life, or what's working in your health routine, or what's working in your, I don't know, marketing plan. Like you may want to get more specific, but what's working, what's not working. I love this question. Someone asked it in a survey the other day. Actually, one of my clients who's a parenting coach, she asked her parents, what's keeping them up at night? I like that question. I think it's fun to get answers to. And again, you can learn a lot about, what people are worried about or what their pain points are. What goals do they have? What's stopping them from achieving them? What does it feel like when they're at their best? That's a really great question to get actual client language. Like, I feel confident, I feel happy, I feel free, whatever. You don't really know what they're going to say until you ask. How would they rate their overall contentment in life, business, or relationship? Again, where I kind of threw in life, business, or relationship, that's where you may want to get more specific based on, who you're working with. If they could change one thing about their life, what would it be? Or again, like any type of good product or service or business is helping someone solve a problem. And so often we think we know what the person's problem is, but we're a little bit off. And I think people's problems have changed over the last few months, especially. So if they could change one thing in their life, what would it be? And then how likely are they to invest in XYZ? You may say, like, how likely would you be to sign up for a guided meditation series? How likely would you be to take a course on self-care? How likely would you be to invest in business coaching or whatever it is? And then even asking more follow-up questions like what might be in the way of you putting in this time, money, blah, blah, blah. So you want to get even deeper, and that's where those qualitative questions really make a difference.
So you want to set yourself up for success. For surveys, what this looks like is in advance, you want to create your survey using Google Forms or another survey builder. You want to use a mix of quantitative and qualitative questions. You want to make sure you indicate if certain questions are required or not required. And then you want to ask on the survey if they'd be open to a follow-up call. That way you have the option to create a follow-up opportunity to connect and or gather more info. And in this case, you can say like if if the survey is anonymous, you could leave a space at the bottom that's like, if you're open, if this is interesting to you and you're open up to a follow-up call, could you provide your name and phone number, or could you provide your email or something like that?
Yeah, and in terms of if like questions being required or not required, again, it depends on what type of information you're looking for. But if you've ever taken a survey, you often see, like, especially in a Google form, there's like a little red asterisk next to a question. That means it's required. Like, you can't even submit it unless you respond to it. And so there may be certain questions too that aren't required. So if you're asking specifics about like income or demographics or um, any type of personal information, you're going to want to indicate if certain questions are required or not. And it can help people like feel more ease and at peace with the survey. I really do recommend Google Forms, though. I know Katie and we use them a lot. I like how you can, get the information after. I think it's, there's 3 different ways to review your respondents' answers. And I think depending on how you best see information and data, it's pretty nice in terms of functionality. So, um, another option too, it's kind of goes with the surveying, and Katie and I, as you can see, Katie's screenshot, have done this quite a bit, but you can also start with just simple polls, like, especially again, if you want to reach a broader audience that, if you have ideal clients that are super busy, overwhelmed, stressed out, doing simple polls like this may be one of your best bets. But either on Facebook or on Instagram stories, creating a 1-question poll, it grabs people's attention who might not be available or open to a longer survey. And typically you can see the responses. You can see who replied on Facebook and who replied on Instagram. And so this is also a way to just consistently be doing market research. I've seen a lot of people do this, and we build it into what we do at IGC too. But like, you could put it into your marketing plan, even, to be polling your audience once a week on a certain topic or something that you're thinking about, and be getting their feedback and opinions. And it's quick and easy, and it creates engagement, which is like the key of marketing. Okay, so email research. Be sure you're emailing people who are your presumed ideal client. Again, it may be through an email marketing service that you have, like a CRM like Entreport or MailChimp or ActiveCampaign, or one of those where they've opted into your website. So most likely they're your ideal client, or they're like your parents or siblings when you were first getting started. But you do want to make sure that you're emailing people who are your presumed ideal client. We don't recommend like buying email lists or anything like that. And then you want to think of 1 to 2 questions that they can simply reply to. I talked about this a few minutes ago, but you want to give them, you want them to just literally hit reply and answer the question. Give them a set amount of time to answer the questions and a by when. So here's an example. Hey, so-and-so, thanks so much for being a part of my community. Do you have 5 minutes to answer 2 questions for me? That gives them like, okay, this is only going to take 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever you decide. I'm working on something especially for women climbing the corporate ladder. I would love to know, 1, what is your current position? 2, what needs to happen to get you to the next level? Please reply to me by blank. It would mean the world to me. And anyone who replies will be entered to win a free 30-minute coaching session with me. So it's got a how long this is going to take, when do I need the response by, and an incentive to complete the email. And we're going to talk next week about invitations and getting people to respond and incentivizing them. But if you need an example of an email, this one works great. And we have used similar emails at IGC.
So for phone interviews, what you want to do is in advance create a spreadsheet with columns for the person's name and each question, so you can track the answers to each question as you do your calls, and then see themes for the different questions with the different people. And we'll get to this part in our next part, but that will make it easier to distill your data and spot themes as you speak with more and more people. Come to the call prepared to ask 5 main questions, such as tell me a bit about yourself and why you're willing to talk to me today. What's working in your life right now? What's not working in your life right now? What have you tried so far? How important is it for you to resolve this? How urgent does it feel? So keeping it really simple, really open, and seeing where the conversation goes. You can do this how you want to do it. And our recommendation is that you know, review this training, look at your notes, and decide where you want to start. But a great thing to do is to start with posting a few, really general polls online, seeing if some of your hypotheses are ringing true for people, and then starting to set up calls. And once you have some conversations with people, you might be able to develop an even better and stronger survey. So you can do it in whatever order you want to do it in. And you also don't have to do all 3 methods. But if you want to always be tapping in and getting information from your audience, that's one way to use the 3 methods together. And then while you're on the phone, like, you just follow your intuition. And a lot of you are coaches or trained coaches or becoming coaches. So you know how to ask powerful questions, but you want to ask follow-up questions as you're naturally guided to do so. Like, what's challenged you over the past 30 days? What about the past 6 months? If you could get support around anything right now, what would it be? What do you need right now? What do you want right now? What's your vision, right? And you can go back to earlier in the presentation when we laid out a lot of qualitative type questions. Your goal is to find out where they're in pain, what they've tried, and what getting out of pain would be worth to them, as well as their desires, their vision for their life, and their practical needs.
I love that part about what would getting out of pain be worth to them. That's such a good one. It reminds me of like a sales call. So
and you want to take excellent notes, like listen really, really carefully as much as possible. Write down the verbatim words and phrases your ideal clients use. A lot of times I say this at the end, but spoiler alert, we haven't gotten here yet, but in your marketing, you'll want to use the exact words your ideal clients use to talk about their problems, needs, and wants. How you describe what's going on for your client isn't necessarily how they describe it. So it's almost like you're the doctor and they're the patient, right? I mean, it's more of a collaborative co-creative relationship, but it helps to think of it that way. Like, you might talk in a more prescriptive sense, and they might be just talking about like their complaints and what's bothering them. And then that's the language you want to use in your marketing. I see a lot of marketing is very much about solving the problem and what the solution is, but like your ideal client's not there yet. They just know they have like a pile of shit that they need to sort through, right? So take really good notes of what they ask you, what pain points they share, and what breakthroughs and takeaways they express during your call. So if they say like, wow, that's a really good question, or I've never thought about that, or you know what I just realized, like, that's important stuff to like highlight and take note of while you're on the call. And because your marketing needs to speak to them, you want to use their words and speak their language.
Love it. Okay, so there's a lot of information. Now what? Okay, so we originally, Katie and I were going to do this training in one, and then we realized it was so much information. So that's why we keep saying it's going to be a three-part series on market research. So we wanted to make it really easy for you all to be able to take this on, and put, time and effort into it and not rush it necessarily, but also keep you on track to like getting meaningful market research so that you can figure out what to sell or what to sell next. And so the time now is for you to take action. So the first thing you want to do is decide on which form of market research you will conduct. So again, you could do one of them, you could do all three of them, but your action to take right now is to decide which form or forms you're going to take on, and write out your market research questions by doing one or more of the following: draft the email, create the survey, or make the spreadsheet of questions for your phone interviews. And if you're watching this as a replay or not, like, just you can go back and rewind and so forth if you need some ideas for questions, because we offered a lot of ideas. Um, but depending on your, hypothesis and your niche, you may want to get even more specific. So your job between now and next Thursday is to write out your market research questions for whichever approach you're going to take. Next week, we're going to be back here Thursday at noon Eastern, and we're going to do part 2, which is on invitations and outreach. So we're going to teach you how or who to invite to market research, how to invite them and incentivize them. Like we gave in the example, like free 30-minute coaching session. I've seen people who fill out surveys be entered to win gift cards, all of that. We're going to go into that and the pros and cons of that. And then we're also going to give you some scripts for posting and emailing people to invite them to either, the survey or specifically the phone interviews. And although we love surveys and the emails can work, we really do believe that phone interviews are the highest converting when it comes to actually using market research to fuel your, pipeline, if you will. And Katie, you talked about this a bit in your the pre-marketing training that was part of Let's Glow, but doing market research calls is actually a form of marketing or pre-marketing for a program or a product or a service. And so we're going to give you some scripts for opening the call and closing the call, as well as, of course, inviting them onto the call. So you have homework. You have homework to write out your market research questions. And then next week, we will go through actually getting the market research or surveys or calls set up. Anything else you want to add, Katie?
No, just let us know in the comments how this went for you, how you liked it. I know it was a lot of information. We went a lot longer than we planned,
Story of our
but
lives.
we're responding to the market research that we've been doing and wanted to start to share this information as quickly as possible. So for now, we're sharing it for free, and we're so happy and grateful to be able to do that. And we're so excited to talk to you next week.
Love it. We will see you then. Now I have to figure out how to turn this off.